Did you know that the Hebrew word for heaven is shemayim? Did you know that that means of water? Did you know that dew comes from it? Or that birds fly on it? Or that this word for heaven came from a word shemu, that was the name of a masculine sky god in cultures prior, and ultimately can be traced back to a masculine sky god? Did you know that the history of the Hebrew word for earth, aretz, has the same effect, tracing back to a word meaning both the Mother Earth and the earth? And that early Semitic speakers, most certainly, when they witnessed the dew on the earth or it raining upon the earth, would have considered it literally watching Father Sky and Mother Earth fertilizing, making love, or hopefully making love, but fertilizing one another, and that mirrored, in fact, the view of pregnancy back then, which was a male liquid inside a female body, which caused pregnancy. So it's pretty neat, and I'm going to show you how that works really quick here. So this here is the Hebrew word shemayim. This is it in Hebrew. It reads right to left. That's the sh prefix, the sha, and mayim. So that, just very briefly, it can mean heaven, sky, air, as we'll see momentarily. It's often translated as air, including by the King James Bible. But I'm using, by the way, Bible Hub, which uses all the main, summarizes and has all the entries of the big main academic lexicons for these Hebrew words, such as the Brown Dever Briggs, which is what I was trained on back before this all came online. These are the proper academic, like what you'd be using if you were being taught biblical Hebrew at Oxford. So, and it's now online. So, heaven, sky, air. So prefixes in Hebrew, just very briefly, the formation of the word shemayim. So there's the shin, that which, who, whom, that of works as well, or the one of, as we're about to see. And mayim, there's that mayim there. So sha, mayim is water, waters. As we can see, this mayim, to get put in perspective of how it was considered then. This is Zephaniah 1:3. The birds of the heavens, so this ha is just ha. It means of the, it's a preposition, or just a prefix, ha, it means of the shemayim. As you can see, the shemayim here. So the birds of the shemayim, directly next to, and the fish of the sea. So hayam. So it was considered, shemayim was considered this, the atmosphere, is the moist atmosphere, the humid atmosphere. We're about to see that dew comes from it, means of water. But birds are in it in the same way fish are in the sea. Was how it was considered. Here's some examples of dew. So, for instance, therefore may God give you the dew of heaven. So, mital hashemayim. This is Genesis 27:28. So there's the dew of the heaven right there. There's hashemayim right there. There's dew, as you can see. Another example of dew from shemayim is Deuteronomy 33:13, and this is may God bless you with the. This is a very literal translation. Basically, no other Bible would translate it this way. It would be King James or whatnot. Would be, may God bless you with the precious dew of heaven. Would be how that is constructed in virtually all translations. But here again, we have the dew with the dew of heaven, with the precious things of heaven, with the dew and the deep lying. And this is lying beneath. And what they're talking about lying beneath is the water fertilizes the earth and the seas beneath, and combines with the sun to create the harvest. So, so there you go. So there's some dew there. I'm not connected to the internet now, but there's some dew there coming from the shemayim and connected to the harvest twice there. As you can see in Genesis 1:26, this is actually in the 7-day creation story. So this is, that's the famous story of in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Well, the heaven in that story, which actually is created on the second day of that story, that's shemayim right there. That's the same shemayim as in the beginning. And as you can literally see, I have Genesis 1 here up. there's the heavens, Hashemayim. And here we have in Genesis 1:26, from the exact same story, these are the birds of Hashemayim, as you can see there, but it is translated as the air. So in that text, in fact, it is the air and the moist atmosphere. But that's an example of the way Shemayim was, in fact, considered. It is constructed of water, or the one of water, and dew comes from it. Now, this word, we're going to get briefly to how it was formed, and going back to the father sky elements of it in other cultures. So ultimately, this gets traced back to the Akkadian Empire, which is and goes back further even to the Sumerians, who turned into the Akkadians. So the Sumerians and the Akkadian Empire was ancient Mesopotamia is the first written language of the Sumerians. This was about 2300 BCE that the Akkadians formed from the Sumerian Empire. Same language, just evolved over a couple thousand years. So the Sumerians were the first written language about 4,000 years ago in what is modern-day Iraq. The Akkadians were a bit larger of an empire, as you can see, in the what is now the Middle East. So that is where Semitic languages come from, is the Akkadian language and Proto-Semitic languages out of Akkadia and Sumeria. And one of those languages was, in fact, the Canaanite language, which they were the people inhabiting what became the conquested land by the Israelites, and was ancient Israel. And they were Semitic-speaking civilization, and they actually, and I just grabbed a couple quick sources here, but their sky god, or one of their sky god was Shamu, which is the Akkadian word we're about to see that turned into Shemayim. Was a sky god and was the chief pantheon of the Syrian city of Valak. And in fact, if you go to their Wikipedia, and you can Google around more about this, but in fact, Shemayim, and literally skies, was their god of the heavens. And I'm just going to say this now, and you're going to go, why did he say that? But you're going to see momentarily, they did not, in fact, think Shamu was a god, was a solid dome in the sky, solid metal dome in the sky. They did not think that. So what? We're gonna get to that shortly. In any case, going back to Shemayim, so of water, it's got connection here to divinity, a male god. Before it is a masculine word. Hebrew words like modern French or Arabic have gendered words and gendered tenses. So Mayim and Shemayim, water, is a masculine word. Aretz is a feminine. Aretz meaning earth. And we're going to trace that back all the way to a father sky god, and it's not going to take very long. So I'm going to use the Akkadian dictionary here online by the Association of Syriophiles de France. Here we go. Shamu. As you can see, it forms Shemayim after it. Shamu, that little triangle there, is the sh sound. Here's the Proto-Semitic. It's connected to the Arabic, Syriac, Ugaritic, but there you go, Samay. It is formed via sa or sha. So there's your shin prefix. They just didn't add the shin symbol in Hebrew. Who, which, that, the one of as a relative pronoun, and mu. So water, as you can see down here, mayim, that's the word Hebrew for water. But what we're particularly looking at is dew and bodily fluid, amniotic fluid, and secretion. So bodily secretions that are male, masculine, in a notion of Mother Earth and Father Sky, in the notion of the liquids of the atmosphere touching the Mother Earth, or being touched, or being allowed to be touched, or falling on the Mother Earth. However, hopefully there was, in fact, consent and a healthy relationship between the two, if that idea is in that notion of Mother Earth, Father Sky is indeed in these scriptures. And the first place, of course, to look is this sort of notion in the Mother Earth concept as well. Now, before we go there, really briefly, I'm just going to click back here. Keep an eye on this here. This is connected to An in Sumerian, and the cuneiform's not showing up here, but we'll see it in a sec. Just keep an eye on An. That is the masculine sky god of the Sumerians and where Shamu came from. It is the word for the god, the name of God, and is also the word for sky or heavens. We're about to get there. And does this same effect happen with Aretz, earth in Hebrew? So here we go. This is Arsatum of the Akkadian earth, land, underworld. This is Ki, that is the Mother Earth goddess and wife of An, who is the Sumerian Mother Earth god and also the word for the earth. We're about to see that. It is the mistress of the underworld, Arsatum, but there's your attribute of a goddess here, feminine divinity associated with it. We're going to click through to the cuneiform and other form of it, which is also Ursatum, and we're going to see the Aretz pop up here. Now I apologize that I did not pull up the Bible Hub for Aretz, but this is Aretz. There you go, Aretz. That's the Hebrew, Arsatum, earth, ground, earth, underworld, and connected to Ki. Now, very briefly, if you just want to quickly have me confirm, Aretz here is the first day of the creation story, and there is the earth, Aretz. So there we go, and we are coming back to the Akkadian Aretz and Arsatum. So there we go. So there's the feminine divinity. Now, who are Ki and An that formed? An turned into Shamu. Ki turned into Arsatum and Arsatu, which turned into Aretz in Hebrew, which is the earth, and Shamu turned into Shemayim, which dew comes from and means of water. So this is the cuneiform. It's a star of the generically can just mean God in the sense of sort of it is the ultimate God, but it is the word for An, sky or heaven, and was also the supreme deity of symbol for the supreme sky god of the Sumerian pantheon, An. So there'd be 4,000-ish BCE to 3,000-ish turned into, as you will see, Shamu, meaning sky. Or heavens, or of water, or the one of water, and including people, groups that had Shamu as a god itself. Now, here we will see that the Sumerian god An, supreme father god, father sky god, in contrast, but in fact in partnership with Ki. Ki is the Mother Earth goddess of the ancient Sumerian pantheon, who was the chief consort, aka here, the wife of Anu, and the Akkadians added an U to the end of An, but Ki was the wife, chief consort of Anu, as you can see, the chief consort of the sky god An. So the sky god An, father sky god, mother earth, again. So there's the father sky, mother earth of the Sumerians, turned into the Akkadians, which turned into, as we can kind of click backwards here. So we'll just quickly look at this one more time. So in terms of Shamu, there's An, and there's Shemayim. Pretty simple, eh? So there's the Sumerian father sky god. There's Shamu and Akkadian. There's Shemayim. Means of water, dew comes from it. Also had divinity attached to it in cultures immediately surrounding and before the Israelites and ancient Hebrews came to the area, and were formed out of the area. And constructed, and it's the exact same thing with Arsatum. So there's your Mother Earth, Father Sky. So early Semitic speakers, 100% for sure, when they saw rain hitting the earth, or rain falling on the earth, or dew, and plants growing out of it, they were looking at Mother Earth, Father Sky in their eyes. That notion was certainly there in early Semitic languages. There's no question about it. It's kind of amazing that given how simple that actually is, I have never seen it elsewhere. But let's ask the question then, is there any actual evidence of this in the Hebrew Bible itself? So to some, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. So the Hebrew Bible, the one that starts with "In the beginning God created heaven and earth," that one. So, just for the record, before going in, it should be expected that we can find ideas like this here, including that the biblical Abraham, the father of nations in the Bible, the patriarch of the Israelites and Ishmaelites, he is said to have come from Ur of the Chaldees, which is was Sumerian Akkadian territory in what is modern-day Iraq, and traveled out of there with some sort of documents or ideas, but it's credited, the ideas carried into the Abrahamic tradition came out of the Sumerian and Akkadian region. So those words, Shemayim and Arts, were certainly part, and Shamu and Arsatim were certainly part of that. And early documents of Hebrew scriptures, it's reasonably considered that those ideas might particularly be present in them, including notions of central tradition, 7-day weeks, and the very, very old texts, the very important texts that were spread widely and preserved carefully. So, with that in mind, guess where we're headed? We are, in fact, headed to the creation story, the Genesis 1, start of the Bible, creation story. And this is actually really fascinating. And I'm going to go through this as swiftly as I can. And I might make a separate video a little bit. I mentioned something about a solid dome earlier, but I'm not going to go too far into that today. Again, Shamu was not a solid dome in the sky to those previous. People are going, a solid dome in the sky. The birds of this text, as I showed earlier, the birds in this text. Oh, I clicked off it, but I showed you earlier. There it is. Yeah, I didn't click off it. So the birds in the 7-day creation story in Genesis 1:26, they literally fly on the Shemayim. They're of the Shemayim. They're in the air. So the text is not talking about a solid dome. And I have to briefly reference that as I go through this, but we're going to get there momentarily. But before we get there, I'm going to talk about how basically Shemayim is formed. So again, when we say in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, the story is about the creation of the whole thing is in the beginning. The whole story is in the beginning because heaven is in fact created on the second day when it's something called the Rakia is formed. And here's that solid dome. We'll get there in a second. Expanse to 99% of translators generally nowadays, but and has been for a long time, frankly. But we'll get there momentarily. And but Shemayim is formed on the second day. It's air. So the firmament of Shemayim is also the air in Genesis 1:26 of the same story. So, anyways, the first day we're going to go through this, and we're going to get to that firmament briefly and talk about Shemayim and that solid dome notion. But on the first day, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface, the face of the deep. So what this is saying is the deep is oceans. Okay, this deep water, this deep here, that the wind of God, the Spirit, the breath of God soared, hovered over the blue, over the face of the waters. That water, the deep waters, later in the creation story on day 3, day 4, that's where the fishes are going to swim. The fishies and the whales and the dolphins. That's where they're going to be. This earth, this formless and void earth, will become, on the third day, continental land. It will be Yabasha land, dry land, formed land. It's from a root connected to sort of, can be connected to sort of dried pottery in the sense of like that sort of dried land, crusty land, dried land. But it's no longer tohu vebohu. So that's what we're talking about. But going into this, what we're going to look at, what's really interesting, is this right here. That is, in fact, I don't know what my clicking here, but this tohu vebohu right here. Tohu vebohu. So these words, interestingly enough, so there's water covering tohu vebohu earth. The earth will eventually come up to the surface somehow, or wind will blow it apart to let it get to the surface, and there'll be oceans and land. And it'll be called something else in terms of form. It'll still be the Arets, but it'll be Yabash instead of Tohu Vebohu. What is Tohu Vebohu? Formless and void, it's translated. So, I'm going to click forward here. Formless and void. All right, so here's Tohu. Formlessness, confusion, non-reality, emptiness. Okay, pretty simple. I don't know. I mean, this text is not describing some sort of metaphysical thing. I mean, this earth literally will become the continental land on day 3. Fish will swim in this ocean very short, in 2 days, really, according to the text. Or is it on day 4 or 5? It's day 4 that the fishies come. It's 5 after the sunlight. But anyways, the fish are going to come later, and they're going to be in the sea. So, but tohu vebohu. Now, tohu and bohu both mean this, basically, in many senses. But they're only used in conjunction. The two words are only used together twice. And the precise phrase, tohu vebohu, is only used a singular other time in the entire scripture. Do you want to see what it is? All right. Let's take a look. How about Jeremiah 4:23? Now, as I read this, I want you to think of a volcano, which they knew of back then. Volcanoes were not, in fact, invented recently. They've been around for a while, including all over the Mediterranean region, Northern Africa, the Middle East, what is now Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Ethiopia. They are all over the place, and they've been going off periodically, well, for kind of forever, so far as we understand the earth. But, so, I beheld the earth, and indeed, it was without form and void. So there's your tohu, there's your bohu. That's the only other usage of that expression in the entire Hebrew Bible, which is a few thousand pages long. And the heavens, hashemayim, the sky, there was no light. Maybe like volcanic ash blocking the sunlight. Okay. And I beheld the mountains, and indeed they were trembling, quaking, and all the hills moved back and forth. All right. I beheld, and indeed there was no man, and all the birds of the shemayim, by the way, and all the birds of the sky had fled. I beheld, and indeed the fruitful land was a desolation. This is not a good translation. A desolation, a wilderness. It's not a wilderness, trust me, in the sense that Midbar does not mean a wilderness in the sense of the tropical rainforest. I beheld, and indeed the fruitful land had been made a desolation. And all the cities were broken down at the presence of God by his fierce anger. So does that sound like a volcano to you? Right? And as I said, I mean, this has been an active volcanic field in what is now Yemen. This is some in Saudi Arabia that have been going on and off, including relatively recently. Libya, there's volcanic fields there, and there's one that went off around the time that the pyramids were being built. And in fact, they know that there's a bigger volcanic eruption. There's been big ones in the Mediterranean region, and they found ash in Egypt. Not exactly sure which one caused it. And in fact, the scripture, of course, is written on a flaming mountain spewing smoke into the sky with fire coming out of it and stuff. Apocryphally, that's where the Hebrew Bible was written, on basically a flaming, smoking mountain. So yes, of course they knew about volcanoes, and in fact, the only other usage of tohu vebohu together is right here, which is tohu vebohu, describing stone running like a river, like it's like a river of stone in a wasteland. If you can picture like the Hawaiian, sort of like it's not like Mount St. Helens erupting, right? But it's the only thing that can be there is it might be a couple bushes. It's just sort of desolation. There might be a porcupine that goes through, or a couple birds of prey. But this tohu vebohu sort of line that people can't cross and nobody can live there, which is the next thing. So as you can see, none shall live. People can't live there. It's a desolation. And this desolation with tohu vebohu, stones that are tohu and bohu, it is describing in the same passage and describing these streams, and this stream, this line, it's referring to the streams, shall be turned into a pitch and dust of brimstone. This is the same word that is used in the fire and brimstone expression made famous by the sort of Sodom and Gomorrah, and shall become its land burning pitch, night and day. Not shall it be quenched forever, shall it ascend its smoke from generation to generation. It shall lie waste forever and ever, and no one shall pass through it. And what they shall not pass through is in fact a smoking line of smoking tohu vebohu stone. So, in other words, lava. So, there you go. And to the extent that people knew of lava, to the extent that you might have heard the expression, the pillar of the earth. Well, that's only used once in the entire Hebrew scripture, that expression, the pillar of the earth. And it's literally means molten support. The only other use of the term muzak in terms of pillar is in fact talking about big, not human formed stones, but in fact basically volcanic rock and the formation of mountains. And it's like dried mountains in that sense, but it's just big pillars of rocky crags type of thing. But the pillars of the earth literally means molten support. Here it actually is used in the sense of what essentially is dried volcanic rock. It's from suk, which literally means to pour out and to melt. So if you think of melted stuff pouring out, I think you'd probably think of a volcano and lava. So again, that's the term pillar of the earth that everybody's knows so well, but we're all on pillars apparently. In fact, it means a molten support. And it's actually interesting in the creation story itself that on the first day, there's this term Merakafet of God, the spirit of God soaring or hovering over the water, and it's masculine mayim on feminine tohu bohu lava. And in fact, that term Merakafet is very rarely used, including birds over a nest, and that term brooding, I think is it Fulwinican? It has a connotations that word is related in other Semitic languages to fertilization itself, which the suggestion is perhaps they may have thought, in fact, they were not on pillars, but in fact the earth was like an egg, and God like a sort of a bird flying over it in a sense. So fascinating, but as you can see, on the first day we therefore have water on fire, right? We have the oceans on molten earth is the conception of the early earth that these ancient people writing the story had. So what happens with water on fire? Well, the fire itself is going to kind of cool down the top layer of it, but also it's going to boil the water, which will create the atmosphere, and the atmosphere happens to be called Shemayim, which means of water, and dew comes from it. So that happens. Guess what? Here's the formation of the here's the first day, and let there be light, and yes, there's darkness on the surface of the deep. There might be light underneath with that molten lava, right? So there we go. It's actually really interesting that it qualifies that there's darkness on the surface of the deep, but not below it where there's tohu vebohu lava, earth. So water on fire creates steam, an atmosphere, and poof, on the second day you get Shemayim formed. Now, really briefly, I'm not going to go too deep into this Rakia thing. So God says, let there be a firmament. Now this term firmament, where's my Rakath stuff here? This term firmament, lots and lots and lots of people, Jewish Publication Society, for instance, and many others, translated it as expanse, precisely because, as I showed in this exact story, in Genesis 1:26, birds, this expanse, this rakia, this firmament is called Shemayim, and later birds, just like in Zephaniah 1:3, are of the Shemayim. They are also of the Shemayim in this text. This Genesis 1:26 is in the 7-day text. So in the exact same story, and it's translated as air here, but not firmament. So suddenly the firmament becomes the air. And it's this notion, as I said, it's this odd notion of some sort of solid dome in the sky. It comes from this root rakah, which it was used, it means to spread out. But it was used also in the sense, it can be used in the sense of stamping or beating out, as in beating out of a metal. So in the formation of, say, a shield or a mirror or something like that somebody was pounding out of metal. Well, there you go. That's sort of the sense of it, and it gets turned into this odd notion. Once you learn about this theory, this notion that ancient Hebrews thought that the Shemayim was in fact not what dew come from it, birds flying, but in fact what they actually thought it was, solid dome people claim, is a solid dome in the sky. I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but it is. It's a solid dome in the sky beyond which is the blue sky. Okay, and the blue sky is a primordial water. Now, it is also, by the by, an invisible dome underneath of all of the clouds that open up with windows and doors that are invisible and magical to let rain through. And also, there is invisible dome cloud doors that let the rain into the clouds, right? There's like this multi-level, sort of like an MLM of doors and stuff opening up, and it is. Well, okay, I'm going to briefly explain how sort of how this works on the second day and how ridiculous this notion, as you've seen, is translated as the air later in the creation story itself. But so for the record here, so this is Jeremiah 51:16. On the second day of the text, as you'll see, the waters are separated. There is an expanse, and between the water, there's an expanse between upper waters or waters above the expanse and waters below. So the waters above in the text are, as you can see here, this is a very literal illustration. When his voice he utters, there is a multitude of waters in the heavens. So water in the Shemayim. Another way of translating this for people mostly is when he thunders, the waters in the. So this is the waters in the waters. You know, that's what thunder is. The waters in the waters roar, meaning the waters in clouds. Now, what are clouds? It makes those clouds rise from the ends of the earth. As we can see here, we can actually see evidence of people. He causes the vapors to ascend from the earth to form his lightning clouds, right? Like that's how he, it literally, it shows evidence of evaporation. Again, these people were, back then, I mean, highly advanced languages, metallurgy, botany, farming. I mean, there was people in these regions that, I mean, the ancient Greeks were building big, humongous things. The Egyptians, the pyramids are so complex that we don't even know how they engineer them to this day. And the notion that these people, that back then, they didn't understand how a cloud was formed through evaporation. You can literally see this happening on a hot day. You know, they walked through fog. They saw clouds that were fog that they walked through. They saw clouds halfway up a mountain. They saw clouds at the top of mountains. They saw clouds at different heights. They saw vapors forming clouds like right here. And thunder was considered water in the clouds. So water in the water. And that is actually, in fact, evidenced by the term, by the way, the term, there's actually a term pillar of cloud there. That never used for, it's another word for pillar, but doesn't even mean something hard. It can mean pillar of cloud. And never used for pillar of the earth, by the way. So anyways, in terms of clouds, shakak, sort of something that is not solid. This is what clouds come from. This is the root. To rub away, to beat fine, to pulverize. Shakak. Do I have shakak in my prayer? I have to go back. That's shakak. Gonna work? There we go. So, shakak, dust, cloud. So, it's from a word root meaning to beat fine, to pulverize, implying like a dust, small particles, like sand, like dust, right? So, they knew of the small, it implies small particles of water in the clouds. And, as you see in Jeremiah, thunder was water rumbling in the Shemayim, meaning the rain clouds were thought of basically as upper waters, as waters up above the expanse of Shemayim. So there's the lower waters is the oceans from which, or the lakes or the streams or just, the moisture in the ground. And there's vapors that go up to heaven. So it's the lower waters is the waters of the earth, and the upper waters are the waters of the clouds. And you can see that right there. So, and this term firmament, as I said, you can see it, here we talk about it, and it does this expanse will divide between the waters and the waters. So God made the expanse, the rakia, and there's the waters under, and there's the waters above or in the upper part of, and God called the sky Shemayim, the firmament. God called the firmament Shemayim. The birds fly on shortly, and actually also in this text, to fly on, literally on. But one of the things, and in terms of this rakia thing, and I just don't want to spend, I can do another video on the solid dome theory. It's actually pretty hilarious, to be honest with you. But it's hilarious, but also it's just absurd. Sorry, I don't want to be grumpy or anything about it. But one of the things about a rakia too, just going to briefly look at raka. So rakia, it actually is used to describe, as you can see, to beat, stamp, beat out, spread out. Now, I just described what shakakim was. This is saying the skies. It's the clouds. And in Job 37:18, the entire chapter is about the formation of a thunderstorm, and this is about the spreading out. This does not say Shemayim, the skies. It says shakakim, the clouds. And in fact, this is a thundercloud that in Job 37:21 gets blown away by the wind and allows sunlight to reach the earth. So, for example, it's used in that exact way in Job 37:18. But as you can see, it's used also in terms of spreading out or hammering out gold sheets and metallurgy, that sort of stuff. So that's where the solidness comes from. Now, one would expect, if there is a solid magical dome in the sky that is a solid dome of metal, it might be referenced, I don't know, a couple times, maybe 10 in a 1,500-page book. How about basically none? So there's the Rakia in the 7-day text, which is also, as we've seen, translated invariably by a lot of people as expanse nowadays anyways. But there's a passage in Psalm, God, as we've said, the masculine God is in fact associated with heaven because, as we've talked about, Shamu and of water and the masculine waters and the father sky going back to An. That is the father sky tradition, and he's connected to Shemayim. Of course it is. So that expanse of heaven, Shemayim, is in fact associated with the abode of heaven. There's some passages of metaphor and allegory and whatnot about visions and of this. But there's a couple of passages in Psalm referencing just the expanse. That is a reference to the creation story itself, that expanse. And these Ezekiel passages, all of them, are a reference to a four-headed angel, or four four-faced angels with faces of different animals on each face that sort of fly around on a chariot with this rakia attached to their heads, connecting them with some sort of throne above them that Ezekiel sees. And whether or not these things have this as actual form or not, physical form, it's not clarified, but it has nothing to do with a celestial solid dome keeping out an ocean of the sky, of the blue sky. Again, this is the Ezekiel passage. The only passage that kind of really references in its own accord outside of a reference to the creation story is, in fact, in Daniel 12:3. It says that wisdom is like the expanse of the brightness. The brightness of wisdom is like the brightness of the expanse of heaven. So basically, the brightness is like a clear sunny day. So you'd think that a solid dome in the sky that magically has windows below clouds and above clouds and filling clouds from the blue sky, and no, they didn't know about evaporation, and it's all about the rakia. You think that would be in there somewhere, but it's not. And in fact, the book of Job in 37:18, that it actually prefaces. It seems to be mocking the idea of a solid dome in the sense of, it says, "Do you know?" It's talking about a calm before the storm and people in a hot heat, calm hot heat like the calm before the storm. And then, do you know how to spread out the powerful thunderstorms that look like or have the appearance of, or give the appearance of, or even look like a molten mirror, in the sense of a looking glass back then would be not like with the ones you see at Walmart today. They would be darker metal with imperfections, giving them a molten appearance, and picture the molten looking appearance of a thunderstorm. That sort of effect. And in fact, the passage here in Jeremiah, if you go forward, he brings the wind. If you go forward, we can't here because I'm not connected to it. Basically, the next line in that is Jeremiah talking about metalsmiths creating idols that are fake because there's no wind in them. And in fact, it seems to be mocking in the sense of, that's kind of how you talk about the solid dome. The number one question about the solid dome would be, in fact, right here in Job 30, at the end of the passage of Job, is how exactly the wind here, and it's not the skies, it's the thunderclouds. The whole. If you go to Job 37, the whole thing is about the formation of thunderclouds forming big storms and whatnot. And the biggest thing you can ask is the thunderstorms that were formed, and it's formed in 37:18, spread out, those thunderstorms that were spread out with that archaea root, how are they blown away by the wind? Because there are translators that will see that archaea root and say, oh, it's talking about a hard as metal cloud or something. But, I mean, wind clears them 3 verses later. So the whole thing is kind of absurd, but in any case, on the 3rd day of the text, so now we have the first day, as you remember, is the oceans on Tohu Vebohu earth. Tohu Vebohu is lava. On the 2nd day, Shemayim is formed of water. Dew comes from it. Birds fly on it. It is the moist atmosphere. In the creation story itself, it is what birds fly on and are of the, in the exact same sense of the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea here. That Hashemayim is the exact same expression, as I have shown. So we are moving on to day 3. Okay, so on the third day, the waters, the dry land appears. Okay, now this term is Yabasha. So on the third day, the waters are gathered under the heaven into a singular spot, and dry land appears from underneath somehow. However it raised or was parted, it doesn't really clarify. But Hashemayim al Makum, and it lets appear the dry land, and it was so. And so this now we have the Aretz, and in fact, life forms are going to directly move from the Aretz shortly. They're going to be the children of the Aretz. But the Aretz is on the third day, and the Shemayim touched for the first time. So let's recap. And I hope you haven't, no spoilers by looking ahead here. Let's recap. Shemayim, of water, is what dew comes from to fertilize the earth. Blessings for harvests in the Hebrew Bible about it. Birds fly on it, but blessings for harvests around it. From Shemu, of water, also a name for a sky god, and goes farther back to the Sumerian and Akkadians, but Sumer in particular, their sky god An is directly connected to the Supreme Father Sky, whose name was also the name of the sky. And same effect with the Aretz, earth, the feminine divinity Ki, through Arsadim and Eretzu. So Mother Earth concept. So what do you think happens on the third day when Father Sky and Mother Earth touch for the first time? Let bring forth the grass and the herbs and the yields, the seed, the tree, the fruit that yields fruit according to its kind, things with seeds, plants, vegetation, which elsewhere in Scripture, in early Scripture, in Genesis and Deuteronomy, dew is associated with a blessing for the harvest. So there's your Mother Earth, Father Sky, and there is no way an Akkadian, an ancient Akkadian who learned a bit of early Semitic Hebrew, or early Hebrews, or Semitic speakers, including Arabic speakers in Proto-Arabic and Proto-Semitic languages, would not read this text and see a Mother Earth, Father Sky. There's no way that they wouldn't. It is there, that concept is there, including that the name of God here is Elohim in this text, which literally means gods. El means God, Elohim means gods. And reading this, one would in fact see gods in this text, including, by the way, if we looked at Bereshis at the beginning here, this is a little bit more not esoteric, but it's not quite as clear. This actually reads in the female beginning. This is a feminine word, resh. It means like top. It literally means head. It's in the feminine form. But really briefly, is this my resh here? Where did it go? There. So this is it in masculine form. That resh is now masculine here, but in feminine form, that it at the end, the reshis at the end, is so as you can see. I mean, it can mean chief, like chief is in the capacity of their chief, head of a man, but it can mean a leader. So even something like inside the translation as inside the first lady, and I don't want to get too mystical with this, but in fact, that notion, resh is associated with for something to be the top, there must be a bottom, which is might be related to a notion of a perspective of gravity, which is pressure, primary feminine pressure, of course, birthing the world in the sense. Bara, this term bara, created, can and is associated with birth, biological birth at various points. So if a primary feminine pressurized place might be a womb, for instance. And a womb, rachem, that term is actually associated with mercy and love. So in fact, you could read this as actually being a feminine divine being, the name of a feminine god, the chief, the first lady, so to speak, and sort of primary in the feminine start. in the feminine beginning. I mean, you can, at the very least, that needs to be added in the feminine beginning. And in fact, in the book of Job, there is in fact a passage that I'm going to go into this in another video. There is a passage in the book of Job that does indicate, and I'm going to get to how this translation was lost, shortly, and it is very tragic. There is in fact some indication that what they did during basically pre the genocide by Emperor Hadrian after the Bar Kokhba revolt in about 132 BC or CE. That back then, when the book of Job was written, they did in fact consider this. There is a passage about this particular text, the first 3 days, that begin with a mother's womb opening up. But inside or from the chief female is in fact a valid reading of that word there, which is pretty incredible. Going back to the this third day. So again, the dry land is YHWH at this point. So we're way back here. We're YHWH, which is where did my YHWH go? So this is from a word root meaning to dry or dried up or withered. I'm talking too much maybe, but or over speaking, but there is a passage here in a psalm about it's used in the relation to pottery. So it's like pottery drying up. So if you can picture like ancient pottery it wouldn't be molten lava you're potting, but earthenware, that sort of moltenish drying upness, that notion is in fact associated with that word, and there it is. This is the YHWH, or the Seder of the Aretz on the third day when it touches the Shemayim. So if you can picture kind of that a pot, right, like earthenware pottery, when heaven and earth touch for the first time, it's sort of earthenware pottery, and then heaven and earth touch, and then plants are formed. And interestingly, actually, one of the really interesting things about this too is if we scroll down, and I don't know if my if it's gonna, I don't actually have my internet connected right now, but if we scroll down, there is in fact the we can't get to the Adam and Eve text here, but the Adam and Eve text actually begins with a description of a barren earth and mists coming up that fertilize the earth. So the Adam and Eve text does in fact have the same notion of a Shemayim, essentially mists, dew, fertilizing the earth. That is how vegetation is formed, and life begins to be formed in the Adam and Eve, even Adam text. One thing that is amazing at the end of this text is the life forms here. So they're formed, and one thing that's interesting, the only thing given by God in this text is really, Elohim gives living souls to the animals and humans, and we're a form of animal, but the humans and animals, and the human and animals, the plants are given as food, but it is specifically stated the plants are, but not other animals. And the other thing sort of given in this text is the Elohim of this text actually, it uses the term rule. Humans should rule, be fruitful and multiply, as should the animals, by the way. But humans will be the rulers of the earth. And I think it's best understood as caretaker in the sense of because in this text explicitly humans are not supposed to be eating these things, or these animals are not intended to be eaten. Plants are, they're gifts. But one of the things that God says is, okay, so the plants are what has been given to me to eat, and also you're in charge here, basically, in the sense of we can shoot down asteroids to save the world. We also do some pretty gnarly bad stuff, right? And don't take care of the animals and sort of steward the animals. But one of the things about that is, of course, the text is acknowledging freedom, is that we're in charge, sort of thing. Kind of, sort of. It's our job to take care of the earth. And in that sense, God says those things and then looks at everything and says, hey, it's good. This is good. I made the earth. I made all the plants. I made all the animals. I told the animals to not eat each other, including the humans. And I told the humans, well, listen, you're kind of in charge. You are in charge here. You're free. And then you're free. Don't eat each other. don't eat the things with the nefesh chaya in this text. And then God looks at everything and God made, and behold, it was very good, is the line, meaning the freedom and the creation and the freedom and the one real sort of message, which is that plants are in fact was what was given to us to eat. And interestingly, the animals are also, the plants are given to the animals to eat, but it is specifically clarified that, or specifically omitted that in this text that the animals are not, were not given to us for people to eat, but the plants were. Now, one of the very interesting things at the end, the animal life moves forth from the arets in this text. And in fact, at the very end of the text, and I hope it's going to let me click through because I'm not connected to the internet, but I do have it pulled up in my thing. If I can just move forward just one thing here, pardon me. So if we go to, let me, it is, okay. So just very, very basically, and God rests on the seventh day. We don't know what happens on the eighth day. He just rests. He says, you're free, here's the world. You're free, rule it, and the plants are for you to eat. And didn't say the animal. The plants are given to you to eat, but the animals were not given to you to eat. And he sanctified that last day, and there's no eighth or ninth or 10th day story, so I'm not sure what happens afterwards. But this actually is the last line of the text here. And these are the toldot of the Shemayim and the Arets in their creation. So these were, this story was, these were the creations. And one of the things about that, so the Shemayim and Arets form the plants, the animals come forth from the earth, the Arets, with Elohim's help. And in fact, Elohim says, let us create humans in our image. And it goes on to say, male and female. That term image can variably, it sort of means stuff of, in the sense of, it does in fact, it's an image, but it's also, that term zelem can mean sort of in the pejorative sense, an idol, but in the sense of the material. It's the actual material that make up the idol or make up the figurine that forms the likeness. So we're just going to quickly click around to the last things here. So we did Resh. Going back to that, the toldot, this is Selim of the made in the image. And as you can see, it's sort of like they're molten images. So it's images, but they're molten sort of figurines. And but like in this form. So this guy doesn't like what's going on, but will despise their form. And that's an interesting thing when you consider the Mother Earth, Father Sky notion. Is the animals come forth from the Arets? Of course, there's a divinity associated back, but that notion, Zelem, is quite powerful in the sense of being made in the likeness of God. In a sense, that divinity being infused and created into us is, in fact, sort of made of the stuff of, in a sense, and reflecting to a certain degree consciousness, maybe something like that. So, but very briefly, we're going to get, there's that Merakafet, actually, I did find that. I don't know if it's going to let me click through, but I did. So you can see here that Merakafet on the first day, let her move, but here it is, brooding, fertilization. So that first day, there's masculine water on feminine aras, the tohu vavohu earth. The word used for God, Merakafet, that sor word, does in fact have associations with fertilization. Now here is the word toldoth. This is that last word when I said these are the toldoth of heaven and earth, of Arets and Shemayim, is the last line. The sun and moon were created separately, but in the text that we didn't get into, they're made and placed up in the Shemayim, high up in the Shemayim, and in fact, Shemesh, the word for sun, is created similarly to the word Shemayim, and it was in fact an Akkadian god of the sun. And people often will say that Shemayim has nothing to do with of water, because what it really means is high. It means height. And of course, the obvious counter to that is no. The root sameh or shamu, that means height, means of water and means the sky, and is associated with height, became associated with height because it's the sky. And so the term Shemesh, or Shamash was the Akkadian god of the sun, but Shemesh is something. It's sort of shamayim, of water, sort of lofty water in the sense of samei. It's sort of the same associated as high in the sky fire. Or conversely, it's also thought Shamash is totally unrelated in its construction. Shemesh, high fire, up there water, sky fire, basically, or of fire, basically of fire. That Shemesh, Shemayim, of fire, of water, and they're associated with height, because to the extent that the Shemay root has anything to do with Shamash, which it might not, because this online lexicon says brilliance, it means high in the sky fire. That's an abbreviated form of that. But Shemay or Samay was associated with height because it's the sky, and Shamu came first. That word came first. The word for sky came first before it was associated with that word with height. In any case, we're going to Toldot here of Shemayim. And Aretz, before I go back too far into this, I'm sorry if I... but Shemayim, again, it means of water, and dew comes from it. Shamu, of water, dew comes from it. It also means heaven. So it also means sky. So of course, if dew is coming from this stuff, I mean, we just saw this in the creation story about its formation. It just is what it is, right? And it's obviously what it means. But in any case, this Toldot, that this literally means the generations, in the sense it can mean children. So the formation of life in this text is plants, birds and ocean life, land animals, and people, which is basically correct evolutionary order. Of all the things you could write about, you get the evolutionary order correct. And these are actually called the generations, the descendants. From the root Yeled, which means to bear, to bring forth, to beget, to give birth. So it's using, I mean, you can see it here, give birth. So so in that sense, and it's used in that final line there in their creation, in their bara. So this is in a way, it's the birthing story. It can be validly translated like that. It's not only the creation story; it's the birthing story. And again, I'll take you back to Rashid, which is that first line. It's the birthing story, and in fact, there is a passage of Job I'm going to show you momentarily. Bereshit inside the female beginning, and I'm actually going to click on that right now. That passage in Job, which is right here. These are my own notes here. But Job 38:8. Who closed the seed behind doors when it gushed forth out of the womb? When I clothed it in dense clouds, swaddled it, too low, in thick clouds, and I made breakers my limits for it, set up its bars and doors, and said, "You may come no farther. Here your surging waves will stop." So this text is referencing day 1, 2, and 3 of the text. So it's womb. It's the sea being. It's on day 3 when the sea is being shut behind the seashores of the Yabasha Aretz. But it's this, when it gushed forth out of the womb. There's a direct reference to a female womb there, and in fact the waters not being inside this female deity, but in fact coming out of her as if she's birthing the world. And there's the clothing in dense clouds, which is the second day, and there's the third day, making the breakers for it, and the bars and doors and the seashores. Basically the barriers, I don't know about that translation, and said, "You may come no farther, and here your surging waves will stop." And this is God talking to the sea, by the way, as if the sea is alive. And what's interesting is that term swaddled there, hatulatau, obviously that choice of translation in terms of swaddle has the notion of the dense cloud swaddling a child, a baby. Also here is, so in terms of rashis, so there's water gushing forth from the womb. And that line is in Micah 4:10, a woman giving birth and writhing in labor. This same expression is used. The word for Hebrew is rechem, from word root meaning love or mercy, and in a manner, the birthing rashid in the 7-day text is associated with love itself. And well, the term doors here is not used for seashore or anywhere else in Scripture. There's two really interesting things. One is that it's from a root to mean to lift up or draw out, in the sense of lifting a bucket or from water or well. So in terms of the third day of how land rises is actually an interesting use of that word. The other is that it is used in Job 3:10 to describe the doors of a woman's womb, and elsewhere in Ecclesiastes to mean lips, as in the lips of a mother womb. Lips of a human, but the lips of a mother's womb. So the word use of it here it might be a slight play on words given the birthing imagery, because it's talking about the doors of a mother's womb opening up in the same book that doors is used. Doors of a woman's womb, and here the doors, the doors of the seashore, and as it gushed forth out of the womb. There it is kind of interesting. Again, we're going to get to. There is some indication, including taking on sort of that solid dome notion, which was in other cultures, of this sort of blue sky dome thingamajig, that actually they seem to be mocking it in Jeremiah and the book of Job. But there is some evidence. There's passages in the book of Kings about Solomon holding court, about mirroring the exact language of the creeping things, the living things, in the exact language of the 7-day text. The birds, the bees, the creeping things, that sort of thing. The people were coming to his land for counsel on science, essentially. There's also the Song of Songs is written in the perspective of a female longing for a male god. But there's notions that back then this was in fact the way I just described the 7-day text is in fact how they understood it, including about the rashis. And sort of one of the things about this is, how could it have been lost, this information? And the simple answer is this. So the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was 132 to 136 CE, the Romans were controlling ancient Israel, and there was a revolt, and an estimated, and these are pretty widely accepted numbers nowadays, even with modern scholarship. About 500,000 to 600,000 people were killed, which is the large majority of the population, by the Romans in retaliation for this revolt. This genocide of them, the Hebrews and the Jewish people. The rest were taken into slavery, almost their entire academic class, priestly class, people who read Hebrew, all of their villages, their scrolls, everything that the Romans could get their hands on, they destroyed. I don't know. Some scholars, it was an act of genocide, and it was so severe in terms of Jewish learning and Hebrew learning that when you see the term "the Lord" today, when you're reading an English Bible, that is in fact in Hebrew is the YHWH root. Often people know the word Yahweh, which is the holiest name of God, so to speak. And to this day, Hebrew people, and in fact many Christian communities as well, will not say that word because they are concerned that they're not pronouncing it right, including because Hebrew back then did not have vowels on it. The little dots that you've seen on some of these Hebrew words, like these little dots. So these dots were not there until about 1,500 years after they were put down, maybe 1,000 years. But one of the things about that is that people only the academic learned sort of Hebrew priestly class knew the pronunciation, and they were all killed. and so or almost all of them. So people don't say the holiest name of God out of fear of mispronunciation. And so, if that's the case about the holiest name of the God of the people, certainly information like this could have been lost. And in fact, for thousands of years afterwards, it was also, by the way, named the Roman Emperor Hadrian named it the area of Palestine, Palestinia, after David. David and Goliath, the story of David and Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine, and they were in many instances in the scripture, an arch enemy to the ancient Israelites. And so to in the midst of this genocide, the Romans named the land Palestine, basically to mock, insult, humiliate, and wipe the memory of the Hebrew people from the region. But, and in fact, in many, it was... but why wouldn't this have been done in the last 1700, 1800, 2000 years then? Oh, the answer is simple. The biggest answer is this. You click around here. This looks so simple on the internet. In fact, these lexicons were painstakingly put together over the last about 100 years. Cross-referencing it. It's all being electronic, so cross-reference the entire scripture. Just poof, there's how we know that there's only one use of that term, pillar of the earth, right? 30 years ago, that would have been very hard to figure out. 60 years ago, 80 years ago, you'd have to go through every single word of the whole thing looking for it. Stuff like this, Sumerian pantheon. Only very recently have people figured that out, period. And to the extent that it was known 80 years ago, you might have to fly to the special book session of the Oxford Library type of thing. You know what I mean? This type of resource is brand new, and somebody is going to figure this stuff out very soon. But part of that too is very few people actually read Biblical Hebrew or know how to do this type of research the way I'm clicking around. I did at university, but it's very few people that actually know how to do it. And for the 2,000 years in the interim, until very recently, say somebody had, 400 years ago, very, 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 very few people read Biblical Hebrew. And their knowledge of it would be far less than scholars today. And on top of that, not only did not have these lexicons, even if you figure something like this out, you would not have had knowledge of the Sumerian pantheon or Akkadian dictionaries. You wouldn't have known about the Akkadians or Sumerians, most likely. Very tiny numbers of people, if anyone, knew that 500 years ago. But part of that, too, is in the middle of the Inquisition, for instance, and even before then, if you suggested things like languages that existed, time that existed prior to the Hebrew Bible, you could get put to death. If you suggested polytheism or feminine divinity, but in particular polytheism, any divinity outside of a singular male god, 400 years ago, in Europe, for instance, you could be put to death for that. And even if you had figured this out and had the courage to share it, you can't just make a YouTube video. You can't just, you can't do what I'm doing. Who are you going to share it with? Who are you going to write to? How is that going to work, right? And there just wasn't the resources to do it. And the amount of people that could read this are tiny. It also is why that some of the translations are frankly kind of questionable from 300 or 400 years ago. The King James Version with the firmament, for instance, it's a very questionable. But part of that is they just didn't have Bible Hub to look at Rakia and Raqqa and click around the way I have. They didn't know about volcanic eruptions and could quickly Wikipedia volcanoes of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. You know what I mean? Like this is... So it looks really easy, and in a sense it is, and it's going to get done by somebody else soon. In the meantime, you look online now, and this is heaven in Judaism, and by heaven in Judaism, this is what pops up when you look up Shemayim here. And it's, a dwelling place of God and other heavenly beings according to the Bible. Yeah, and birds, and birds. So, and birds. It is from the Proto-Semay, and it's Shamu, and that's Shamu, Semay. We could click back on the Shamu page, and Semay will pop up there too with the Shemayim. There's stuff like this. This is more, mystical stuff. This is there's some sort of allegories of visions and stuff like that. But Exodus 24:10 describes a pavement made of sapphire and lapis lazuli. No, it doesn't. Where, by the way, this is the term windows of heaven, doors of heavens. It happens 6 times in a book full, and never in terms of Ehyeh, in a book full of poetic metaphors, and we still use expressions like that today. The Bible is full of metaphor and poetry like that. But this is Exodus 24:10. And they saw the God of Israel, and there under his feet there was, it was as if it were a work of paved sapphire stone, and it was like the heavens in its clarity. In other words, we're going to read this whole thing here. So this is a passage. I'll just let you read it here. 70 Moses alone shall approach the Lord, and that's the Lord. That's the YHWH root. When Moses came and told the people, that's from the Ehyeh root. But Moses wrote down the words of the Lord. It's actually this is a very important passage religiously to a lot of people. He built an altar. Saw some young men of Israel. They burned offerings. And okay, and here's 10 here. Here we go. And they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was a work like a pavement stone of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. So as clear as Shemayim itself, which again does not say that Shemayim is sapphire. It said that God was walking on something that is mountainside, by the way. It's come up with me on the mountain. He's walking on sort of the mountainside on some sort of, sort of like the yellow brick road, only a pavement made of sapphires, and it's clear. So it's clear as the sky itself, in the same sense it's clear if I look at my computer screen right now, I guess through my glasses, but as I look through my computer screen, the sky is also clear. So it's crystal clear, just clear, something clear. He's walking on the mountainside, basically, sort of thing, or walking around the mountain. And by the way, about this text, so come up with me on the mountain. God says to Moses. So Moses goes up, and Moses went up the mountain. The cloud covered it. Glory of the Lord settled on it. For 6 days the cloud covered it, but apparently the Ehyeh is underneath the dome. It's on the dome. It's under the cloud. The clouds are covering the mountain. How does this work? And on the 7th day the Lord called from within the cloud, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop in the eyes of the Israelites. So the whole looked like a volcano, it sounds like. So, and Moses went up for 40 days and 40 nights. So here's Tohu Wabohu, just briefly, the Wikipedia on this. I mean, it's King James without form and void, formless and empty. I actually figured this out they actually have this here now on the Tohu Wabohu page, which is amazing nobody else has figured this out, because I actually read this in, I think it was an Oxford scholar book named John Day that I found the other 3411 one. And Jeremiah 4:23 I did manually through BDB with my old book BDB, but it's now up there for the two things. And Jeremiah 4:23, which is a reference to Genesis 1:2. We read Jeremiah 4:23. It's about a quaking mountain and the light of the sky being blotted out, and everything running away from a quaking mountain, spewing tohu wabohu earth, and running away for their dear life with the light of the sky and mountain. So again, like you see, which is a reference to Genesis 1:2. Yes, in the sense that it's lava, but there's nothing there referencing the creation story. It's just a volcano going off. Again, it's kind of odd looking at this. I actually have looked at this, I don't know, a while ago, and so it's just sort of, you look at the Genesis creation narrative. Here you can see their theories on this. Again, it just, if you miss the Tohu Wabohu part, And there's stuff about Shemayim. There's stuff here about this dome in the sky stuff and this firmament, and it makes no sense. I mean, you see this whole thing about firmaments, and I've shown how it's formed, but I've shown literally how it goes from Shemayim being called a firmament to the exact word Shemayim being translated as the air that birds fly on in the same story. Like, it makes no sense. It's nowhere else in the scripture, and it is weird to see this. I know Wikipedia is not, but this is, it's odd. It's odd, and yeah. So that's it. I think I've got everything. Yeah, I think that's it. So I thank you for listening, and hopefully I did okay on my long-winded. By the way, if ever you run into a solid domer, and I ran into him, and they will invariably quote Job, that passage in Job, and just say, well, how did wind? You don't have to tell them about birds in the Shemayim or dew coming from it, or talk about tohu vebohu and evaporation and the formation of clouds and the root of shikakim. You can just go, this verse talking about that you say is a solid dome is talking about clouds, because it literally says clouds, and they are blown away by the wind. 3 verses later, explicitly. So, speaking of long-winded, it just, right? So, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks for listening.